All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes best-selling suspense author Clare Mackintosh, who will discuss her new explosively addictive thriller, Hostage. Today, Mackintosh will be in conversation with author of The Other Woman, a Reese Witherspoon Hello Sunshine book club pick, Sandie Jones. And special, today is the book birthday, both here in the US and in the UK. So we are incredibly excited to be celebrating the book birthday with Claire today. Left Bank Books is St. Louis's oldest independent bookstore. We would like to thank all of our supporters, the supporters of Claire and Sandie, and everyone for their outpouring of love for our bookstore. We offer curbside pickup and delivery to anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world even. We are now open to customers coming into the store, so you can find this incredible book on our front tables and on several displays throughout the store. We are very happy to be able to bring our event series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and bring in new thoughts to make the world a better place. Also, to find fantastic books. We hope that you enjoy this event, and we hope that you support Left Bank Books. You can purchase a copy for you or for your friends at left-bank.com. Many of you have already done that, and we thank you so much for your support. I am Shane Mullen. I'm the events coordinator for Left Bank Books. I help produce our hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We will be taking questions from you, the audience, at the end of the event, so please type your questions as a comment. You can do that at any point in time throughout the event. And be sure to follow Left Bank Books on Facebook and YouTube to be notified about all of our fantastic virtual events. We have a ton of events planned for June and July for readers of all ages. For the mystery lovers, we do have Missouri author Laura McHugh this evening that I absolutely adore, so you should check out that event as well. Now about today's book, Hostage. Lisa Jewell, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Then She Was Gone, says, feels like a blockbuster movie. You can save hundreds of lives or the one that matters most. From New York Times bestselling author Clare Mackintosh comes a claustrophobic thriller set over 20 hours on board the inaugural nonstop flight from London to Sydney. Mina is trying to focus on her job as a flight attendant, not the problems with her 5-year-old daughter back home or the fissures in her marriage. But the plane has barely taken off when Mina receives a chilling note from an anonymous passenger, someone intent on ensuring the plane never reaches its destination. The following instructions will save your daughter's life. Someone needs Mina's assistance and knows exactly how to make her comply. When one passenger is killed and then another, Mina knows she must act. But which lives does she save? Her passengers or her own daughter and husband who are in grave distress back at home? It's 20 hours to landing. A lot can happen in 20 hours. For fans of the locked room mystery of One by One and the heart-stopping tension, The Last Flight, Hostage is an explosively addictive thriller about one flight attendant and the agonizing decision that will change her life and the lives of everyone on board forever. And some of the praise for the book I will read because there is a lot. Lee Child, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of the Jack Reacher series, says, hypnotically good. Should be a hit, could be a classic. Lisa Gardner, the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Before She Disappeared, says, fiendishly clever. And Karen Slaughter, the New York Times bestselling author of The Silent Wife, says, a propulsive read. And now, about today's speakers. Clare Mackintosh is the New York Times and #1 international bestselling author of I Let You Go, I See You, and Let Me Lie, translated into more than 35 languages and with more than 2 million copies sold worldwide. She is the founder of Chipping Norton Literary Festival and is the patron of the Silver Star Society, an Oxford-based charity that provides special care for mothers with medical complications during pregnancy at John Radcliffe Hospital. She lives in North Wales with her husband and their 3 children. And today we are so lucky to be joined by Sandie Jones to be in conversation with Clare. Sandie has worked as a freelance journalist for over 20 years and has written for publications including the Sunday Times, Women's Weekly, and the Daily Mail. She lives in London with her husband and 3 children. The Other Woman is her debut novel and a Reese Witherspoon Hello Sunshine book club. And now, without further ado, if you would please help me in welcoming our guests for the afternoon, evening, our incredible guests. Please give them a very large round of applause as I welcome to the screen. We have Clare Mackintosh and Sandie Jones. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. What a great introduction. Shane, can you just come to my house and just talk to me? I love hearing your voice. It's gorgeous.
International best-selling author Clare Mackintosh is making dinner right now.
That's exactly what I want. Yes.
Well, I am looking so forward to this conversation, and I know our audience is as well, so I will pass this off to you, and I can't wait to come back for the audience Q&A.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Hi, Clare, how are you?
I'm really, really well. Thank you so much for doing this. I've been so excited about having this conversation, and I should warn you that I'm a really, really bad person to interview because I always want to ask questions. So we'll just see how it goes. But there's so much I want to know about you as well. So where should we start?
Well, firstly, obviously, it's publication day for you everywhere. So congratulations. But how has it been today, and how different because you've not actually had a release in COVID times, have you? So
no, not really.
How has it been today, and how different from a normal publication has today been?
It is a bit weird. So I did have a paperback out in during the pandemic last year in May, but paperbacks are slightly different because you've had a lot of the fanfare for the hardback anyway, and so the paperback I think feels a bit different. And I wouldn't normally have a launch party for the paperback if I've had it for the hardback. So this is the first kind of big release in COVID times, and I won't deny I felt a little bit flatter than usual, and I really felt for all the debuts who have had books out over the last year, because I've had the big fanfare and I've had the book tours and the parties, and I'll have them again. And so I can handle the fact that this one is online and, it's all a bit different. But of course, for people who have just got their first book out, I think that's really, really weird. So I've got one live event happening in a theatre, because theatres in the UK are allowed to operate with social distancing, but everything else is online, and no launch party. But I've signed lots of books. I've done loads with my local. I've got a really tiny independent bookshop in my town, and we've offered personalized copies through that. So I've been doing lots of signing, and those books have been going out across the world. So that's been a really lovely thing to do. And I might open a bottle of champagne later just because.
Where would you normally be? Would this actually be your launch party night, or do you think you would be in America perhaps, or where do you think you would have been tonight in normal circumstances?
I think I'd be in London tonight. So I'm going to London tomorrow. No, so normally the day before, like 2 days before publication, I would normally have my local launch party in my town, and we'd have maybe 100 people, and I would do a talk or be interviewed and do a reading, and we'd have drinks, and that would be fun. And then I would head off on tour, and normally I would just do a UK tour, and I'd be away for 2 weeks, and I would go to maybe 10, maybe 12 bookshops or theatres during that time, and do signings and interviews and TV and radio, and it would all be compressed into 2 weeks. Whereas now, actually, even my radio is being done over the phone and over Zoom. And then with the States, normally my books would come out 6 months or so apart. And so this for me is really, really unusual to have a simultaneous publication day. and I absolutely love it. And not only is it the same day, but it's the same cover.
Yes, which again is unusual, isn't it? Have you ever had that before?
No. And
Okay.
I've always found it a bit difficult. Well, difficult in terms of timing, because you're sort of making a big fanfare about the book, but it's only out in one country, and then you've got the other country kind of having to wait for 6 months or 3 months or whatever, and then you've got to make a big fanfare again. So that's hard. But also showing, which book do you show online? What do you have on your social media headings? All those sorts of things, because I want to support both markets. So it's weird. And you were saying earlier that you don't normally come out at you didn't come out at the same time either, did you?
No. There's normally sort of 3 or 4 weeks at least between mine, and then as you say, the US is normally a Tuesday, the UK is a Thursday. In the main, I've had the same cover, so that's not been so much of an issue. But I do love the idea of just it all being in one day, and so you can really kind of have the big fanfare. I think that's great.
It is nice. So you've had the same cover. That's interesting, because my covers have been completely different, and I've always struggled a little bit with that. And presumably you've had the same title as well.
The same title. I say the same cover. With the other woman, yes, it was essentially the same. Things have kind of gone slightly further apart since then. But also, I mean, I've had changes from between a hardback and a paperback, Claire, which I didn't even know you could do. But so obviously something that maybe didn't work quite as well as they'd hoped on a hardcover gets changed then for a paperback. So my last release, I think The Half Sister, which was a paperback a couple of weeks ago, released in the US, it's a completely different cover to their hardcover copy. So
that doesn't surprise me at all. And although in the UK my paperback covers are just a kind of variation on the hardback ones, in the US my paperback covers have always been completely different to the hardback. Right. Because I guess they're also going to a different market, aren't they? There's a certain type of reader who buys a hardback. I mean, I love a hardback. I really, really love a hardback. I like to read them, even though they're awkward. And I don't want to rip the paper, but I love the feel of a really weighty book.
Weight, yes.
But I know that a lot of people don't. They don't like hardbacks. They're not. They haven't got the space to store them, and they're not easy to read. And so, they want slightly different things. But I do love it. I keep stroking it. Do you stroke your book?
Oddly and very weirdly. Obviously, when I'm alone, but
obviously, I mean,
not it a lot as well.
You wouldn't do it on live on air.
You'd never do that, Claire. No, because that would be just so odd.
Who would do that? That's absolutely mad. Should we talk about writing?
Yes.
Because I was talking. I'm just going to name drop horribly. I was talking to Lee Child last night.
Right. Yeah.
Because the most extraordinary thing happened. I was at another event with another bookshop, Don't Tell Shane at Left Bank, and they'd organised as a surprise for Lee Child to drop in, which obviously I should have been really sort of suave about and gone, "Oh, hey Lee, nice to see you." But do you know what I did?
Go on.
I burst into tears. Like I actually properly burst into tears, like I was being interviewed for, This Is Your Life or something. It was mortifying, and of course it's all recorded and available for people to watch. But after I finished crying, it was a real shock, because he's a bit of a hero of mine. And he'd read Hostage and he'd said nice things about it, which is why he was there. So it was all very lovely. But I thought, while I've got you, I'm going to ask you, about writing. And he famously doesn't plan his books. He sits down with a blank page and it just comes out. And so we were talking about Hostage. And I was saying that if I tried to write it with no plan, that I'd have to rewrite it so many times, because it's quite a twisty book, and in order for those twists and that misdirection to work, I have to kind of seed things throughout the book to lead a reader down a particular path.
Yeah.
And so in order to do that, I have to know the end before the beginning. And so I'm quite interested to know, because that's two authors, you know, me and Lee, coming at it with completely different approaches. So what's your approach?
I am very envious of you, Claire, because I do see you, you know, you're a bit of a post-it plotter, aren't you? And so, and I see that, and I see your whiteboards and your post-its everywhere, and I really want to be that way. That's how I want to be able to write, and that's how I want to be able to plot, but I can't do it. I really can't do it. So you know, I don't know about you, but the hardest part for me in this whole process is writing the synopsis before publication and before that you get an idea signed off, because I have no idea, genuinely. You know, I have a beginning, possibly. I'm hard pushed to have a middle, and I really have no clue what the ending is. So I find that synopsis that's, you know, 2-3 pages. That's all it normally is, isn't it? And I find it so difficult because I just don't plan, because my brain just doesn't think that way. So I have to. It all happens. I'm with Lee on this. Me and him, obviously kindred spirits. It all happens as I go along, which I'm sure drives my publishers completely insane. But I can't work it any other way, and I wish I could.
Well, but why wish you could? Because it obviously works. Your best mate Reese Witherspoon, obviously, you know, is quite happy with it. So
it seems all right. Yes.
Who else can we name drop, Sandie? How many names can we get?
No, that's it. I'm out of. That's it. I'm done now.
Yeah, me too. It's disappointingly short, my little black book. So see, so once you've done that, then once you've done that first draft and it's come out of your kind of magical brain, is it ready then, or do you have to write it again?
It's getting better. Yes, I think I've just delivered book 5, and my editors are saying it's the cleanest first draft that I've done. So I'm obviously getting better at it. Book 2 was complete and utter car crash and was almost really essentially a whole rewrite. So that was kind of just put in the bin and started again. So I'm obviously learning as I go along, but I do try and deliver as clean a draft as possible. Again, I see a lot of authors that just kind of go at it again and again and again. But I do, or maybe just kind of deliver it the first time and just kind of wait for the feedback. But I do, my full intention is to deliver it and it to be fabulous and then sign it off. Obviously that never ever happens.
No. and I always kind of think, this is it, it's going to happen. You know, and I have those conversations with my husband where I say, you know what, I think I might have pulled it off this time. And then of course the notes come back and I go into what we affectionately call in our household the pit of despair, which is not so much a physical pit as a between 24 and 48 hours of I can't write, this is terrible, I want to go back to the police, I'm never going to write another book again, sort of thing. And then I climb out of the pit of despair and read the notes again and think, actually, they're not that bad, really. And I agree with all of them.
Yes.
And then I go and do it all again. But interestingly, like you, so I hadn't realised we're quite aligned, aren't we? When was your debut out?
3 summers ago, 2018.
Hang on a minute. So you're on book 5 and 2018 is when you started?
Yes.
Oh, you're fast.
Book 5 is not until next summer, obviously, for release. But yes, I have delivered book 5. Yes, it's kind of, one a year, really.
That's good. So this is my mission at the moment, is to become a book a year author, not like Booker as in Booker Prize. I mean, that would be nice as well, but a book each year. Because
what happened then, Claire? Obviously after your oh, okay. obviously after your third thriller, you kind of crossed genres, didn't you? You kind of wrote two other books that were very much not crime. What happened there, and was it a conscious decision, or and how have you come back round to your roots? Were you always going to come back this way, do you think?
I feel like I'm on the therapist's couch. This is nice. I'm gonna unburden myself. This is what happened, Sandie. Let me take you back. So I Let You Go obviously was a psychological thriller, and I, like a lot of debut authors, I didn't really think about what genre it was, didn't really know what genre it was. It was just the book that I'd written. But then I understood enough about publishing to know that you write the same type of book. You don't write a really successful book in one genre and then say, I'm going to go off and write dystopian romantic elf fiction.
Yeah.
I bet that's a genre. I bet it is. You don't do that. You give your publisher and your readers more of the same. So I wrote I See You, and then I wrote I Let You Go, and I was lucky that there was enough of a readership there for them to do well. And then when it came to my fourth book, it wasn't that I didn't want to write crime. It was just that the story that was kind of there wasn't a crime novel.
Right.
And my editor, who knew about this story and had known about it for a number of years, it was her suggestion. So she said, I think you should write that book, which was After the End. And I said, but it's not crime. And I'm not. I was worried she was trying to get me to make it crime, to suddenly throw in a couple of murders, and it just isn't that book.
Right.
And she said, I don't think that matters. I think a good book is a good book, and your readers will come with you. And the more we talked about it, the more we as a team felt comfortable with the fact that readers, although they often prefer a genre, actually readers want good books. And when you walk into somewhere like Left Bank Books, you don't just go straight to your preferred genre. You look around the tables. I'm really excited to know that Hostage is on a table. I love being on a table. You
so
wander
cool.
around. You pick up a cover you like the look of. You flick through, and quite often a keen reader will walk out with books in a completely different genre to the one they normally read. So we just went with it, and it was quite a bold move, but actually it all went fine. And After the End hit the bestseller lists. And if anything, what it did was reach more readers, people who didn't want to read crime, who liked After the End, decided they liked my style of writing, and then went and bought I Let You Go, and like that. So, so it wasn't a bad thing. And then after that, I was going to write another book in that sort of genre. So After the End I call it family drama. It slots under various things, including contemporary women's fiction, which is not a genre that I choose to use, but it's there quite a lot in some shops. And so I was going to write another book like that, a sort of I sometimes call them Jodi Picoult books, that kind of moral dilemma, would that I had her sales, a kind of moral dilemma book. And I wrote one after the End, and it was about a white police officer who was arresting a young black man, and the young man had a heart attack and died at the moment of arrest. And so it was a very sort of serious novel about the ramifications of this death, told from the point of view of two women, the girlfriend of the man who died and the wife of the police officer. And I wrote this book, and there was a lot that I liked about it, but I couldn't quite pull it off. I couldn't. There was magic missing from it.
Right.
And I just,
that's your feeling, or other people's feeling? That was your personal...
it was my feeling. It just wasn't happening. So this was kind of July 2019, and so the book would have come out, I guess, in the sort of summer of 2020. But I couldn't make it sing. And all my books so far have had a kind of like a USP. There's been a thing about them. It's either a structural oddity, or it's a particular twist, or it's an easily definable hook, and I just couldn't make it work. And then while I was on, I flew to the States that summer with the family for a month, had the most amazing holiday. And I was on this plane to San Francisco, and I'd been thinking for quite a long time about doing a locked room thriller on an aeroplane. And so I thought about it for the 13 hours it took to fly. And by the time I got off the plane, I had the synopsis for Hostage. And I emailed my editor, despite having told her that I'm out of contact for a whole month. I'm definitely going to take this time off. I'm not going to work. So I emailed her literally kind of from the airport with this synopsis. And I said, look, I know I've been working on this other book that I'd already sent to her. Sent her the first draft, but I've changed my mind. I don't think I can pull that book off yet. I need to come back to it. Meanwhile, I've got this really high concept idea for a thriller. Here's the synopsis. And I said, I really, really want to write it now because, I'm really excited. I know the whole story, and, that's it. And she's brilliant, my editor, and she's very understanding. And so she went, okay, that's fine. We'll park the police death book, and you can go and write Hostage. And I'm so glad about it for lots of reasons, not least because I don't think I'm the right person to write that book.
Right, okay.
I realise now. In the intervening months, the Black Lives Matter movement has grown and swelled and taught so many of us white authors a lot, I think, about appropriating stories and about thinking about which bits of stories we're qualified to tell, and whether it's the right time to tell them. And I think that if that book had come out last year, actually I would have felt very uncomfortable about the timing of it. And so for those reasons, I'm glad I parked it, but mostly because I loved writing Hostage so much. So again, it wasn't a conscious decision to say, okay, we've done that sort of book, now let's write a crime book. It's just, this is the story and it happens to be crime. So yeah, I'll just see what comes out next, I think.
And was it easy to write? And you say you loved writing, so it was a joy. Was it from start to finish?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously apart from the pit of despair, but it was, it was because it was a challenge. And I do like the thing I miss most about being in the police and having a proper job is doing something that makes my head hurt. Something that's difficult, that's a challenge, and I don't know how I'm going to pull it off, and I'm sort of mulling it over. And a complex thriller does that for me because it's a difficult puzzle to put together. And I haven't ever written a locked room thriller before. And I was talking to Ruth Ware about it because, of course, she writes amazing sort of closed, they're not necessarily locked rooms, but they're sort of closed cast thrillers. And she's got lots of tips on how to do it. But we were talking about how one of the biggest challenges, of course, is you can't introduce anyone. So you can't have halfway through your book the kind of the guy with the twirling moustaches walking in and introducing more suspects or solving it. You've only got the people that are there from the beginning, and you've got to make that atmosphere dynamic, even though no one's going to move, no one's going to come in and out. A couple of characters can go to the loo, but that's pretty much it. They can't go anywhere else. And so I liked the fact that I found it quite difficult to write. And I liked the characters, and I think something that After the End taught me, which is a very character-driven novel, whereas my first 3 thrillers were very plot-driven, is that character comes first. And so although I've written a crime novel now, a thriller, actually I spent twice as much time working on the characters as I've done for any of my previous thrillers.
And did that feel quite overwhelming at times? I mean, what I thought was just so clever about The Hostage is that a lot of the characters are identified by seat number. I mean, I just think that is absolute genius. I mean, was that something, how did that come about? Was that a kind of a conscious decision not to actually introduce too many big players in it and just kind of keep all these other characters kind of just at bay a little bit, but there?
Yeah, I think that was difficult, because if you introduce too many characters with too much story, it's a bit overwhelming, isn't it, for a reader?
Yeah.
And you're just scratching the surface of everyone. So that was a bit of trial and error. The first draft, I don't think had. So those people that we're hearing from in those seat numbers, and I think there are about 10 of them maybe, they are they're passengers on the plane, obviously, and we get little bits of their backstory, the reason why they're making that journey. And a lot of the motivation for this book was all the trips that I've made. So I travel a fair amount, or traveled pre-COVID for work. And because I'm traveling for work, I'm on my own. So I'm not distracted by children or husbands, or, I haven't got a conversation to have. I'm just watching people, which is one of my favorite things to do. I'm sure yours too. And I'm always wondering why people are traveling. You see people at airports looking tearful, and you think, where are they going and who are they leaving? And so those little passenger chapters were an opportunity to create little vignettes to show the reader all the different reasons why people come onto a plane. And yeah, they were fun, but they weren't there from the start. And I can't remember now whether it was my editor who wanted more of them, or but yeah, sort of organic process, I suppose.
And I think I've heard you say that you like writing the behind the scenes stuff, so kind of what's going on away from sort of the main thrust of the story. So was that also a conscious decision? Was that there at the very beginning, literally what was going on down on the ground, as well as what was going on in the air with Mina as well, running alongside each other?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I liked the sort of symbolism of it, the contrast between what's up in the sky. When a plane goes overhead, I mean, maybe not quite so much for you in London. You probably see a lot of planes. I'm up in North Wales, and if a plane goes over, then that's quite exciting. But if you look up at a contrail, I mean, even as a kid, I used to wonder where that plane was going.
Yeah.
And I find it really fascinating that in that tin box up in the sky, that's too small for you to see, you can just see the vapor trail. There are hundreds of people eating and drinking and, chatting and falling in love and breaking up. And a pilot friend of mine talks about how planes are like mini cities in the sky. And she says, just like in any city, people argue and they're born and they die, and, life goes on, even though you're suspended. And I loved that whole concept. And equally, when those people look out of their window and they see these tiny, tiny little houses, inside each of those houses is a drama happening, and they've got no idea. So the contrast was really appealing to me, and also running so it's not a spoiler, I don't think, to say that in effect there are two parallel locked rooms in very different ways. And running those two timelines together was challenging to write, but also just a real gift for dramatic possibilities, because of course I can cut between the two and pull the reader away, and that pacing for me is something that mostly happens in edits rather than writing. So I find the most appropriate moment to cut away and go, drop into a different story and then come back.
So you don't then write a complete, when you deliver your first draft, you're expected to come back and do a lot more work on it.
Yeah. Certainly first draft. And I'm actually at the point now. So maybe a few books ago, I would deliver a first draft knowing that it needed work, but not really knowing what to do with it. And that's a bit different now, because I pretty much know what's wrong with my first draft, and I often send it in with my own notes, which is a bit of an odd thing to do. Like, I've marked my own homework, where I go, so, I'm not happy with this, and this character isn't really sort of coming to life yet. But rather than carry on working on it for another few months and then hand it in, actually, I would rather have my editor's input, because I'm writing a book at the moment, writing next year's crime novel, which is possibly the start of a series. I don't know yet. And I've ended up changing probably about 70% of it between the second draft and what will be the third draft, having already changed half of it between the first and the second. And this is really normal for me, like really standard stuff. Right. So I will write over the course of the life of a novel. If the novel is 100,000 words, I will have written 4,000 maybe on that book, but by the end of it. And I'm guessing from your face that you don't do that.
No. As I say, every word I write, I fully intend and expect it to stay in. Again, I think it's just a whole different. I don't know that I could. I don't give myself that space, I don't think. And again, maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should give myself a little bit more room to kind of manipulate things and edit things as I'm going along, but I don't really give myself that space, which I think is probably why I'm a little bit shocked when each time it comes back, and it does obviously need a lot of work, because I really do believe I've delivered my absolute best work. But
so I only feel that at the kind of second draft stage is normally where I think that's it, I'm done. And then realize that I'm not done. And then it kind of, so I was looking through my notes the other day, because I haven't started this third draft yet. And the kind of the overall message from the edit notes is, this is great, we could publish this now, but we can make it even better. Yeah. And unfortunately, as a result of working through those notes, I've also hit on something that's going to make it even better.
Oh, I love that feeling.
It's so annoying though, because it involves stripping out, a whole thread. And books are they're like houses made of cards. House of cards. You pull a thread, don't you? And then there's just so much that collapses. It's quite frustrating.
What about your actual sort of daily writing process? I mean, obviously it's been very different the last year, 18 months, certainly for me. You've got children at home and had children at home, homeschooling, and how has that changed your day-to-day writing life?
I think I'm back into it now, or I will be. Yeah, I think I'm back into it. Although, of course, we're approaching school holidays, and so I will fall out of it. And I'm already looking forward to September and getting into a proper routine. But for most of last year, I actually thought I was broken. I just couldn't write. I couldn't focus. That's what it was. It's not that I couldn't write. I couldn't concentrate. In the first maybe 3 months of the pandemic, I made a conscious decision not to work. So I told my editor, I'm not going to do any writing. I'm going to homeschool my kids, and I'm going to focus on being at home and looking after them. And during that time, I got out of the habit of writing, and I got into the habit of jumping to attention every time a news report came on with death tolls and, vaccine development and all those sorts of things, and instantly reading through it and working myself up. And it really shot my focus. And it's taken until, I would say, about 2 or 3 months ago to finally get back into the kind of, you know, this is what I do. I sit down at my desk and I work, and I don't look at the news every 5 minutes. How did you find it?
I was very similar. I kind of felt drowned in the bad news, really quite suffocated. And I know we were all feeling the same. But I just found, I mean, sadly, I couldn't even read, let alone write. I just found actually focusing and concentrating on a novel was really difficult for me, because like you, I'm constantly, I've got one eye on the TV over there on Sky News, and I've got one eye on, you know, a news website, BBC News or something on the screen. And I just really, really struggled I just completely lost my mojo as far as writing is concerned. It was just, I just had to, like you, give up for a few months and just literally just put it to bed and just say, it's not working. There's no point me keep forcing it, because it would have been just awful, the result. So I just kind of bedded down for a few months with the children and just did what everybody else had to do, and just keep your fingers crossed and hope and pray for good news.
Yeah. And so has that, so earlier you mentioned that you're a book a year author. So
Yeah.
for me, it was kind of, it didn't matter so much because my books come out when they come out. But if you're sticking to a schedule, has that put you behind, or have you just had to catch up?
No, I've had to catch up.
Wow.
And I am, once I do get in the groove, I do write very fast. So I did have to catch up, but the beauty, I think for me, it was almost like the guilt trip, which was the one I've been writing throughout lockdown. It's almost turned into a bit of a vanity project, to be honest, Claire, because it's all about escaping to Portugal, and which is where I wanted to. Obviously, I spent all year last year just praying and wishing I was there. So it just turned into actually a very nice project. Once I got my head around it, I could just transport myself there on a daily basis, and that actually helped greatly with focusing my mind and just realizing that there is still a bigger world and a big world going on out there. It just slowed us down a little bit, and we just need to kind of treat it maybe with a little bit more respect, and just deal with what's on our plate.
I know Shane's going to come in a minute, and we're going to do some questions, but I just wondered whether your journalist background influences that, if the fact that you can get your head down and get words on the page and you know, work very fast, is that because you've been used to working to deadline?
Yeah, perhaps, actually, perhaps. I hadn't thought about it from that point of view, but yeah, possibly. But also I think it's just a very, very different discipline. You know, it's with journalism, it's, I'd never thought that I would ever be able to write fiction, because with journalism, you know, it's reporting really, isn't it? And it's kind of, especially when I'm interviewing, you have to report it word for word. And so I thought fiction and using my own imagination would just, you know, I just didn't think I'd be able to do it. So it's a very different discipline. So yeah, and once I get going, I'm off. I'm off. But it's you know what it's like. It's such a wonderful feeling when you're kind of in that and off you go. But at the other end of the scale, it's, you know, it's pretty desperate when it's not flowing quite as well as you'd hoped, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. Yeah, it is. Right, Shane, have you got some questions for us?
Me here. I've got a bit of sunshine coming in through the window. Do excuse me while I bask in it.
First off, I want to say how much I have loved this conversation. Claire, this is our second event together. You are delightful as always. Like, I just am such a big fan of yours. And Sandie, it's really fantastic to have you here today and to hear about your writing process, about your upcoming book, which I did drop a link in the comments. So I encouraged people to pre-order. Is it already available in UK?
Not until August the 3rd.
Oh, wait, I think that's when it is. Yeah, when does it come out in the UK?
I think it's a bit later, August the 19th, 20th, whichever the Thursday is. Yeah.
So we're
getting it first.
Can you give us the pitch? Can you tell us a bit about it?
It's about a group of friends who go off to Portugal for a wedding. But before they've even got on the plane, the bride-to-be is rubbing everyone up the wrong way. And once they get out there, it just all goes very, very badly wrong. And it's just a case of whether Rachel, our protagonist, wants to give this bride to be Ali the benefit of the doubt, or if there's something more behind her behaviour.
Brilliant. I should be looking out for that. That sounds fabulous.
It sounds like the perfect companion to Hostage. Like, yeah. So I wanted to start with some questions while the audience who are a little bit quiet, but I'm certain that they will come up with questions as I ask a few of my own. I wanted to specifically ask you, when I first got the book and when I was reading the book, I was super curious about, so many people have a natural or maybe irrational fear of flying. Like, it is just one of those things that so many people fear. And I'm wondering if that went into your kind of calculation of the intensity of the book.
Yes, I think it probably did. So I'm not frightened of flying at all. I love it. I've always loved it, and I love everything about it. But I'm very aware that people are nervous about it. And yeah, I guess it gives us a head start. I think setting books in a setting that is A, relatable, and B, already quite tense, means that I guess you have to work less hard at making it's much more of a challenge to take something like a wedding where everything's happy and filter in the suspense and the tension into that. So yeah, easier for me, because as soon as you say it's a crime novel, it's set on a plane, actually people's imaginations are doing so much work before they've even turned the first page, which is very helpful.
It sounds like you're going to the right weddings, and I might be going to the wrong ones, because there are so many weddings that I've gone to that have a very natural tension to them. Some of them I've officiated well.
Has it ever occurred to you, Shane, that there's a common denominator in those?
Almost all of the weddings that I've officiated have been very fantastic. But there was one where I was like, that's not going to work. So did you talk to any flight attendants when you were researching the book? I wonder if that was part of your kind of trying to formulate this plot of. Yeah,
not for plot reasons, really, although I did have to talk to so I've got a couple of friends who are pilots and a couple who are flight attendants, and the only plot related information that I needed from flight attendants was to do with weapons. And I had a really interesting conversation with a friend about this, because she said, so I said, look, just tell me, obviously I can't bring weapons on a plane, but I know from being in the police that anything can be a weapon, a pen can be a weapon. So tell me, what is there on a plane that I can cause someone serious harm with? These are all obviously very dangerous conversations to be having online, and at any minute the FBI are going to swoop in and seize my computer and arrest me. So she said, well, this is really tricky for me to answer, because I could tell you instantly where the weapons are, but I can't tell you because you shouldn't know this. So we had to dance around the houses a little bit, and it was like a game of 20 questions. So I would guess, and I'm like, is there an axe for breaking windows? No, there's no axe. Okay. Is there something for cutting people out of seatbelts? There is. Okay. So we sort of played this game where she wasn't telling me anything, but I was kind of picking up cues. And that was, and then what I would do is I would take that information and I would go and look on what in the police we would call open source information. So it's open source intelligence. So anything that is sort of in the public domain. So I would search on forums and inevitably find that information in the public domain, buried in a message board where flight attendants are talking to each other. And then I could go back to her and I could say, right, that information that you told me that you were worried about, I've found it online now, so you can be comfortable that you haven't, breached any security because someone else has done it as well, but I haven't named any of. Normally I would name all my sources in the acknowledgements of the book, but I actually haven't. And the pilot, one pilot in particular, who did all the talk down stuff and basically sort of held my hand while I flew this plane, and read scenes and did all sorts. He specifically said, don't name me. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
I know, that's intrigue right there.
Oh.
But though, those sorts of details, that they're really important. Not just so I said I didn't need an awful lot for plot, but I needed a lot for authenticity. I needed it for atmosphere. And I've moved from writing thrillers set in a police world, which is something I'm very comfortable in, and I can drop in the right language and the right sort of detail, to a world that I haven't worked in. And so in order to maintain the level of authenticity that I think my readers expect from my books, I had to work a bit harder. And so I read so many of these message boards, stuff that isn't in the book, where they're chatting about what hotels they're staying in and what they get up to on their layovers and what they're eating and how they manage when they're on a diet, and just all sorts of detail that just meant I could write authentically.
All right. The next question is for both of you. And this might be a bit of a spoiler, but you are both British. You are
What?
not. I know. Everyone who's like people who came in late might have missed the introduction. The accents were not a tip off to them.
By Jove.
That's kind of what I'm wondering. So, I'm wondering if your US editors and your UK editors have asked you to change things based on the audience, or if you are writing more for an international audience, and because your characters are very grounded in a place, if we as non-British readers, which I'm assuming most of the audience are, or I maybe shouldn't even assume that, but I'm wondering how much you had to alter for the understanding of a more international audience versus one that can really understand all of the British isms that you might have wanted to include.
I love this question so much, and I can't wait to hear Sandie's answer on it as well. I get quite cross that American books aren't generally changed at all for a British audience, and we as readers just seem to cope with that. I've known what a faucet was for a really, really long time because I've read lots of American books and watched a lot of US shows. But British books are always translated for a US audience. And previously, I've had editors who were very, very insistent about changing, a lot of words that really I felt were quite easy to understand. With Hostage, the edit was really light, and I loved it and really sort of respected the fact that they trusted their readers. Their readers are not idiots, and so I would never change something that's dialogue, because if I've got a British character that's actually those words are coming from their mouth, I can't have them using very, very American vocabulary, because it wouldn't make sense. But if it's in description and it genuinely would cause confusion and it would really jolt an American reader out, then what I tend to do is, rather than change the word, I will rewrite that sentence so that the context makes it clearer. But I think it's really interesting. What's your approach, Sandie?
I do the same. I write very, very Britishly, if that's the word. And I do find it very difficult when, if a scene, it's obviously everything apart from my latest one is set in London or in the UK. I do find it very difficult when you're quite clearly in London, and then in the American version, you know, on the sidewalk, there's something going on the sidewalk, and I, as you say, Claire, I do think you shouldn't perhaps insult readers that they can't understand that it's a pavement and they wouldn't know what a pavement was. Of course they do. And I do just worry that it sometimes takes away the Britishness of a British novel by putting these things in. But then I you know, on the flip side, you know, you have words which I've only recently learned, something like diabolical, for example, over here. You know, I saw a review recently, you know, Sandie Jones's latest is absolutely diabolical. And I was like, oh, that's just awful. That's just because here, that is the worst. You know, that's really bad. But apparently, I'm told in America, please don't ruin this for me now, Shane, and tell me that this is wrong. But apparently, diabolical in the US is a good thing, isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think when you're referring to like a dark book, like you can call something diabolical. You can't call like a whimsical romance like diabolical. Like that would be an insult. But when you're talking about mysteries, yes, diabolical is very much a compliment.
Thing. Right. Yeah. So I'm with you on that. I'm liking this idea, but I just think when in the written word, I just think it probably in the main should be left as the author writes it.
Yeah.
What? So Shane, you're an American reader. What's your take on it? Do you read British novels and not understand what they're saying?
I don't think so. But I will say that there are times when I will be watching Gordon Ramsay and be like, what? What does that mean? Like,
we feel like that though, Shane, with Gordon. We have no idea what it's
like I forget which show of his we were watching, and I was like, I think that's an insult, but I have no, like, he called someone like a squishy frog or something, and I was like, what? Like, yeah.
I do think that the British are particularly good at insults that don't actually contain any rude words. They're just really odd. And actually that makes me think of something else, because if I've had over the years a few complaints from readers about bad language, about swearing in books, only ever from American readers. And I'm wondering if are American readers more sensitive to bad language, or have I just been unlucky?
I have some opinions that I could share with you, maybe not in live. But
interesting.
Like, I think that very much Britishism comes with a lot of like Southern readers, and with those creative insults with the not swearing. So it's possible that those readers may have been Southern or.
That is interesting, because I do think that in British crime, and I actually don't use a high proportion of swear words, but I read quite a lot of crime where swear words are kind of, you know, they're throughout it, because actually these are gritty crime novels with, you know, gang leaders, and they don't tend to say, oops a daisy, I've shot someone. You know, it's got to be authentic. I do love an oops a daisy though.
I love my Miss Marple.
Yes.
But I will completely agree with you that I have read certain maybe high caliber British novels that I could tell were altered for an American audience, and I was just like, they've taken some of the soul out of this book. Like, it doesn't feel as authentic as I think it maybe was, and that's without having read the like other versions. But I'm like, I'm gonna guess, just gonna guess here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I used to read.
Sorry, Claire.
No,
it's just odd when you have like a sentence, and as I said earlier, you know, if a London black cab is pulling up to the sidewalk, it's just jars, doesn't it? Because you know, a quintessentially very British thing, and it's kind of pulling up to an American sidewalk, and it just doesn't, I would imagine, for the American reader, it just jars. It just doesn't, it doesn't flow, does it? It must kind of.
Yeah. So stay true to who you are. Write those fantastic books. That's from an American reader.
Deal.
All right. Well, we have gone past the hour. That flew by so quickly. I know that the audience we still don't have any questions, but they're maybe doing like some multitasking or whatever. But because I know it is in the middle of a workday here, so.
I know, and I'm sorry that, you know, we it would be way past our bedtime if we, and I would, you know, I would make that sacrifice, but I didn't feel I could drag Sandie out of pajamas to do it on your time. But it's always so lovely to talk to you, and this was really nice. And if people do have questions but they're just too shy, they can find me procrastinating online and ask me there. And you know, Sandie's more diligent than I am, but I'm sure she'll be around as well.
And I'm so delightful. I can't wait until we are able to host both of you in St. Louis. Fingers crossed that will happen soon. And yeah, I would love to meet you both in person. So
absolutely fab.
Yeah. So I want to thank you both. I want to thank your publishers for bringing this all together. And to the audience watching, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, this evening, wherever you are. And we hope to see you again really soon.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us.
Bye-bye.